You, my friends, are just in time to Take a Shift, a revolutionary podcast hosted weekly by yours truly, Belinda and Catherine, that will literally alter the trajectory of your life.
We're on a mission to listen, ignite, and transform, challenging ourselves and you, dear listener, to journey deeper and get uncomfortable. Discover what lies beyond those layers of fear, judgment, smallness, and everything else that's been getting in your way up until now. Choose to step into new possibilities and courageously wake up to the life you know you were meant to be living.
So buckle up, Buttercup, summon your curiosity, and together, let's take a shift. Well, hello, our dear lovely listeners, and hello to you, my dear beloved Belinda.
Hello.
Well, it's in the midst of the COVID-19 crisis. It's actually I don't even know what day is this. March the 18th, right? Day after St. Patty's Day. And this episode, this podcast is going to be on something that's even bigger than the virus. And we're going to call it the real virus, I guess. And it's really something that has really come up for me in the last 2 days, being a healthcare worker in the midst of all of this coming on. I came home from work over the weekend. I worked Saturday and Sunday night. I came home Monday morning, and today is Wednesday morning, and everything in healthcare has changed dramatically, even from Monday morning at 7 a.m. There's been several deaths here in our area from COVID-19, as I'm sure there are in many areas, and I don't even think we're just still on the tip of the iceberg from what we're hearing. So there's a ton of fear. There's a ton of fear from, Belinda looking at her two 13-year-old children and trying to explain this, and so they have some concept of it and keep them protected. And Belinda and Blair trying to protect themselves and socially isolating. And then, although I don't have kids, I go to work every day. My partner goes to work every day, and we're essentially around it all 12 hours that we're there. So, Belinda and I were talking earlier, you can go to the grocery store and touch a metal handle, and who knows. So there's this pervasive fear that is raging on this planet right now for good reason. I will say that. Because none of us really know. Truly, none of us know if we're going to make it out alive. I mean, if we really want to say that, we really, truly don't. And I think I was brushing my teeth Monday night, and I was like, in the world today, it was astounding to me to have this thought, but I was thinking, in the world today, in this one moment, most human beings on this planet have the same thought that pervades and peruses their brain at least probably every hour, every couple of hours, every day. But certainly most people on this planet have on their mind, am I going to live through this? Am I going to get sick? Will somebody I love get sick? Will somebody I love die from this? Will somebody I know get sick or die? And I think that's the feeling that's the one thread that we have, that we're conscious of on this planet. And I was like, oh my God, that's not the thought we need right now, because that's all from fear. And so I did some work yesterday with one of my conflict relation therapists that Belinda and I both know. And we were talking about the virus. And it really became so clear to me yesterday that, yes, there is a viral pathogen invading our world that we can't see. We don't know where it is. We can't see it with our eyes. We don't know where it is with our intellect. We certainly don't know. It just enters us. It enters us without our knowing. It enters us without our conscious permission. It enters us without our awareness, and it enters us without our joining in the decision for its entrance. And so that creates a tremendous amount of fear because we're just so fearful. And when we were talking about all of this viral pathogens and all of this fear, it really came to me that the bigger virus here is the fear. And the bigger part of this is the one common thread that we have, which is fear. Fear based. Am I going to live? Is somebody I know going to die? Or are they going to live? It's all out of fear. And I'm really, really clear today, March the 18th, that the bigger viral pathogen here is fear. That I'm so clear on that. There's something to this for me as a spiritual being, having this human experience and being so vulnerable as a human, having this experience. And there's also something very vulnerable about my soul having this experience, because usually I'm a little better at controlling my fear within my soul. Some people may call that control of fear within their faith, whether that's Christianity or Buddhism, whatever that is. Usually I will say, a little bit stronger in controlling that fear of my soul and that vulnerability of my soul, in the sense of maybe that's not the right thing to say, but just feeling very vulnerable on all levels, because the fear keeps coming and I can't get it out of my thought process. So, I just came up, this is what I wanted to talk about today. And Belinda thought it was probably a very good idea since we're all one in this and probably all having the same thought, is that there are a lot of pathogens, quote unquote, that we can't see when it enters us, we're not aware of. Sometimes we are aware of it. It's not that we can see it, but we're aware of its presence, like the pathogen of judgment, maybe the pathogen of unworthiness. I wrote down a couple of different pathogens: the pathogen of hate, the pathogen of untrusting, pathogen of judgment, and the pathogen of worthiness. But above all, I think the greater aspect of that is the pathogen of fear that's entered all of us. And it's pervasive throughout the world because of what we're dealing with. And we're very conscious of this fear. And I think at this point, we're accepting that fear because everybody on the planet's feeling it. So we're validated in this fear, especially with what we're seeing with the cases skyrocketing or going up. And I don't know. I just want to talk about that, Belinda. I'm just trying to get the premise because it's still coming on for me from a conversation I had with Phyllis yesterday. And then you and I and Caroline had that conversation with Phyllis a little earlier in the day when we did a quad trio with the four of us. So I just want to go kind of start there. I mean, as I throw all this up, what are your thoughts? Come with me.
Well, it's interesting because one thought that I had as you were speaking was, we know that as souls having human experience, that a part of our human experience is fear. And we've talked about it in many different ways, how fear plays out. But I don't know that anyone alive today, and let me think before I say that. I keep having images of people living in famines and living in wars where you're surrounded by millions of people who are having the same experience as you, and everyone is really basically trying to survive. And one of the thoughts that I had as this was coming to the United States was, we for sure have people in the armed forces who have gone into war zones and who have been in a group of people. And one could even say, like you've shared many times, like going into healthcare and you're with a certain group of people, but not as like a society, not as a nation, not like as a whole group. Have we,
Right.
anybody in our lifetime, we haven't had war on our soil. We haven't had famine on our soil as a whole society. And so as you're talking about fear, I'm thinking it's not just the US, it's as a planet, we're all having the same experience around the same intruder, the same instigator of the fear at the same time. And so it's a really unique opportunity to be, yeah, to be noticing that. Like, it's kind of like this equalizer. We talk of death as like this great equalizer. Well, we're all still alive, all of us who are having these fear thoughts and who are trying to figure out how to navigate this time. We're clearly alive, and yet we're having this experience slowly, I think, where we're starting to notice an equalizer among us, which is, as you said, anybody's at risk. I mean, I've been staying at home for the last week with the kids and barely been outside. We've been outside, to take a walk, but haven't gone to stores, restaurants, cafes, movie, nothing. Um, but my husband's gone to the grocery store, and every time he goes, I think I keep saying, let's minimize it as little as possible. Can we do it once every 2 weeks? But every time he goes, I think, is he taking the necessary precautions? Like, does he have the same attitude? I'm vulnerable to his choices there, and then thinking about, so I was very, very afraid for a couple of days, and then I just keep having, in the same theme as this kind of wartime theme, I keep thinking about people who have lived, and we referenced this in some of our recent calls, people who have lived through wars, lived through Holocaust, lived through genocide. And the stories that I've heard from people who are alive today still, who have lived through these periods, I mean, certainly, like, fear is a pervasive experience in those kinds of experiences, right? But somehow I keep hanging on to this idea that there is something else that we can choose, even in these most horrific circumstances. And so this question around fear, and there's just so much to talk about. I guess I think I quickly turned it around, even though I'm still uncomfortable, even though I can still get on Facebook and look at something that makes me scared. I'm still turning it around just to keep saying, what's the opportunity here, and how can I see this differently? Because I know where the fear thoughts take me. And honestly, I just want to go in my room, shut the light, go underneath my covers and hide. And I have children, but I also have my own life. Like, do I want to live my life that way in this time period, or do I want to live it in another way? Because I am still alive, right? So that's my sort of train of thought from what you were sharing.
Well, that's exactly right. And you and I have talked quite a bit in the last, probably, what is this now, 3 weeks? Everything's been a little off kilter with, me coming back from Caroline's suicide, and everything coming up from that. And then now this, and you and I have had two themes going on for the last, probably well, it was really before Carol. The week before, I think, is when we first brought it up. But we've been, the two words that we've been working with together is reorientation and reorganization, right? And I think that this is the period of time in this world. I have to look at it like this. I think for me, I'm going to have to look at this as a period where the world is at risk, because some of the beautiful reports, like on Facebook or the news, I can't watch the news much. I watch it a little and I turn it off, make sure I'm getting what I need. I really have come to rely on the emails I get from, my hospital, like every couple of hours, because they're in touch with the CDC and everything. So, and this is where I play the game, in the sense of where I serve. is at Parkland Hospital, which I'm proud to do and love to do. So I really have come down, I've dwindled it down. Instead of, Facebook, you're going to see Facebook, but I've really dwindled it down that that's where I'm getting my information, because I know they're involved with the CDC and WHO and everything else. So I really minimize that, what I'm taking in right now, right? And I really realize, I know in my heart, I know in my soul that what is soul's objective here on this planet, it's expansion, right? Soul's objective for me coming into this in my belief system. I'll say that. Let me say that again. In my belief system, soul's purpose is for expansion. And even with expansion, there are always times of contraction, because we have to have that contrast, because we always can't be expanding constantly, right? We have to have, I think we've talked about that, contraction, expansion, which is the natural ebb and flow of life. And, just in the sense of, if you look at the air quality of China, it's clear now because the factories are shut down. If you look at the canal water in Italy, you can see it from space that it's a different color and it's clear now. And the dolphins are even coming toward the canals and into the canals, as per reports. So it's almost like, and I said in our calls, what if the horrible fires in Australia that just got put out a couple of weeks ago was divine in some sense, even though it's hard to even think of that being divine because of all the destruction, but that it helped negate the spread of the virus being in Australia. I don't know. I mean, there's so many things coming up for me, as I know there are everybody else. But I know that this is a time for soul's ultimate purpose of expansion, even though it feels like it's a moment of contraction as we pull back in social isolation. The only place I've gone is going to work. Even when the National Guard gets involved, I'll still go to work, right? Because I'll show my badge if I'm on the road and get stopped, or however they do it. I've never seen martial law or the National Guards on my roads. Not on this soil have I seen it, like you said, and I'll still go to work. Um, but it's a period of contraction, because here we are in the house 24/7 if we're not going to work, and like for grocery stores, I've moved to where we do a grocery pickup, only because you don't want the exposure, and you don't want to, if you're a carrier and you don't even know it, expose other people. And so that's as minimal as I can figure out how to do it and still get food. Haven't really hoarded a lot. I've kind of prepared, but I hadn't hoarded a lot. So, I'm still going to need toilet paper in probably another week. I'm going to need paper towels, and we'll go from there. But, ultimately, like this is really at this level of almost like, we were talking about Dr. Edith Eger, Dr. Dennis Waitley, who was a prisoner of war, Dr. Edith Eger being part of the Holocaust and a Holocaust survivor, and Dr. Dennis Waitley, who was a prisoner of war for, I don't really remember, I want to say 7 to 10 years, and how they chose in their captivity, literally, in the face of death, literally, more, probably a lot more provoking than what we're even feeling right now, I would assume, because you were smelling in Auschwitz, you were smelling the smoke of the bodies, and in Dennis Waitley's aspect of being a prisoner of war, you were hearing gunshots go off and knowing they were killing people. So right now, I don't hear gunshots going off, and I don't smell bodies that are being in the furnace. So I'm a little, I have it a little easier than what they did, right? And even in the midst of like those two people are really on my mind in the sense of, and they're both living today. They've wrote their stories. You can find them on YouTube. You can find their books. What was Edith's book? It's called The Choice, Embrace the Possible. Even in the midst of smelling your loved ones go up in smoke, literally. And so it really, if we look to other souls that have not just survived, but thrived through their incarcerations and their horrible, horrible events, I wouldn't even gauge this near the Holocaust, really. I mean, that was probably one of the most horrible events I could imagine on this planet. But if we even look at them and try to decipher what was their not only survival but their thriving technique, it was what they chose to bring into their thoughts. It's what they chose to wrap their spirits up in, and they chose to believe. And I think that that's exactly going to be our way out. Our way out is going to be through the fear, because that's the prominent emotion now, right now. And our way out, I do believe, will be through our fear, recognizing it, allowing ourselves to know that we're in fear, and really sitting there with that horrible thing that we all try to resist. We all try to resist being in fear. We all try to resist dying for ourselves and our loved ones and our neighbor. We all try to resist, death coming our way, even without this, virus raging among us, we still try to resist it so that we can have these experiences here on the planet. You get to see another sunrise or a sunset or a bird chirping or a baby being born. And so I think I look to like Dr. Eager and Dr. Waitley, and they not only survived, but they thrived through their circumstances. And even today, I mean, how old's Dr. Eager? 95, 96 years old. She's in her 90s, I think. And, she was able to get a PhD. She's on YouTube speaking at TEDx's. She's having audiences. And, we know that in the last couple of days, we know from a source that one of the things she turned around and talked about in this world is, but where's your passion? That was her comment. This woman survived Holocaust. She's in the middle of the virus and she wants to know where our passion is. Mm-hmm. Now that takes my breath away. I mean, I haven't heard from Dr. Dennis Waitley about this. I would love to, and maybe I should look that up. But it's about where they're putting their focus. It's about where they're planting. It's about where they're planning what they choose to accept and what they're allowing to come in. And we're full well it's fear. We're full well it's fear. And I'm not saying, oh, well, if you choose not to allow fear come in, then the virus won't come in, because you can't say that. But all I know is you won't die in fear.
Or another way said, you'll be living until whenever the day is that you're not living.
Exactly.
I think you bring up this question around passion. It's interesting. I mean, the passion and that word passion, and someone said sometime, I can't remember who, that our feelings are the direct connection to our desires, which is another way of saying what our passion is, right? Our soul came in with a desire to expand. When you say it's about expansion, what I hear is expanding those desires, expanding what it wanted to experience in this human form. And you mentioned earlier that human beings are, we like to avoid fear and we like to avoid death. I think this is interesting. And maybe this is pretty radical, but given that we have 80% obesity in the US, given that we have the opioid crisis, given that most people are not going out and singing and dancing and playing sports, mastering skills, that we're sitting around, as much as I love myself Netflix, that we're sitting around spending most of our free time on the phone, on the internet, on Netflix. maybe seeing family sometime, and we've got some nice things in between there. I don't I think we have this idea that we're avoiding death and these thoughts that we're avoiding fear, but I think in reality, we're doing a lot of things to not live.
Mm.
And I mean, these are some radical thoughts given what we're experiencing right now. And to me, what we're experiencing right now, is we're highlighting that this is like a spotlight for me on all areas in our life that we have not been willing to come to terms with. I mean, what do people do when they get a cancer diagnosis? Oftentimes it's like they do an inventory of their life, right? And it's like, and I have made it a practice in my life, not every day, but most of my adult days, going to sleep at night and thinking, if I died tonight, would I feel complete? And most of those nights, the answer is yes. And part of that practice is really coming to terms with like the choices that I'm making, and does it feel complete for me? Does it feel like a life well lived? Now, does it mean I've done everything that I would have wanted to do? And maybe even as I'm saying this, like maybe there's something about my passion being tamped down and like making it okay that it was good enough. But I'm noticing right now, and for some time before the virus, in my own life, feeling a certain detachment from my own passion, from my own desires. And this period of time is really getting me to think about not just what matters, like, because we do talk about that a lot, right? Like in general, like my family matters and health matters and being kind to your neighbor matters. But again, this passion, like, because we have also told ourselves that like a passion for music or a passion for dance, or that's not a passion. We call those things side things, or we call them activities or pastimes or hobbies, or we don't think about them often in this, like, this is what brings you to life. That's what I'm thinking about. It's like we can focus on the fear, but it's just an extension, I think, of what many of us have been focusing on for years, if not decades. Kind of this tamping down and a continuing fear versus focusing on what brings me to life. And for those of us who aren't in health services and in the military and who have to be out there working, those of us who have the gift of being able to be home with our kids and reorganize our finances, or right, to me, this is the question. We are gifted with this space and time to be sitting and asking, what brings us to life? And that is just continuing from what you were saying. That is going to be a way to walk through this time period and come out the other end. Because one of the fears that I have right now is not so much in my family or for myself. My fear is the planet is going to transform because we've given the opportunity for the planet to heal and to rest. And 3, 4, 5, 6 months later, after this incredible period of time of humanity doing things above and beyond that we probably haven't even tapped into yet, what's going to happen on the planet in these next 6 months, that we're going to go back to sleep. That it's going to be like people are going to go back to work, they're going to go back to school, they're going to go back, and they're just going to do the same damn thing that they were doing 6 months before. That's my biggest fear.
But it's funny because I think it was Monday night. When you talk about when you kind of have that before you go to sleep, you kind of have that thought of, if I died tonight, just kind of that looking back and looking through your life and that checkup, that moment checkup, when I came into nursing, and every provider has to do this, like nurses or doctors or respiratory therapists, every provider in healthcare has to say to themselves at one point while they're coming into their training or during their training, that you say, if I get stuck with a HIV needle or a hepatitis B needle or what other pathogen, it could completely alter or kill me. And you have to, as a provider, a healthcare provider, you, even in a nursing home, no matter where it is, you have to have this question come forward, and you have to say, yes, I'm still going because this is what I'm called to do. This is my service. And in this time, healthcare providers, even right down to the housekeepers, because some of my dearest friends are housekeepers, and I always laugh with them and say, they're in their late 50s, early 60s, and they work so very hard. And I always say, when I hit the lottery, you're not going to have to work hard anymore, because they work harder than it's just amazing at how hard they work. And when I left work Monday morning, I really looked at two of the housekeepers that I saw that I'm very, very close to. They're like mothers to me. They nurture me, in so many ways, like a mother or a grandmother would. And I'm not talking about, like, one of the housekeepers, her name's Kathy, and she's like, I can't believe I can't hug and kiss you, because I always hug and kiss her when I see her. Like, she is like one of my mothers. She's one of my nurturers. And I looked at her and I said, listen, I need you to be really careful in these rooms, because this virus is living on metal, like the beds, on surfaces. And I know we're around it as providers, but so are you. The people that take out the trash. So, like, every single person in a healthcare facility is, of course, at risk. And you're at risk grabbing the door of a grocery store or the cart or whatever it is. But, I really had that conscious thought as it was really amping up in my head Monday and Monday night. I thought, okay, so you're willing to die for this, just like you were coming into nursing, because you're going to keep serving. That's what you do. That's what your acronyms are. This is living beyond your acronyms in a time like this. And some days I was like, why did I not go into business, stay in business, and be home, or at least hopefully be home? But, I was like, if I died, what would I regret? What would I regret? And I thought, well, if I died, I get to see Caroline early, and I'm sure she would turn around and go, what are you doing here so early? Mm-hmm. I'd get to see Motley. I'd get to see my grandparents, my grandmother. And I was like, what would I be okay, really, if I died and went off this planet? And would I have any regrets? And the first thing that came up was my book that's not out yet, not done. And I was like, I wouldn't even regret not having my book out. That's a stupid book. Even if it's mine, it's a stupid book. And I was like, I don't regret that at all. I'm so grateful for the healing that's come around my family and I, and the last month or so, however many weeks. And there's nothing I would regret. The things I would regret, or I would say be sad about, is that I didn't get to see a sunrise or a sunset again. That I didn't get to go get my Sonic Happy Hour unsweet iced tea. That I didn't get to hear a bird chirping. Like, we were standing outside the other day and I was like, oh, you hear that bird chirping? Isn't that beautiful? Like, or I wouldn't get to see a butterfly, which always reminds me of my grandmother. Like, so when I was kind of doing that accounting process for my life, I wouldn't get to, I've decided to get a puppy after Motley's death. Like, I've decided to get a puppy. I never wanted really a puppy again, but I've decided to get a puppy later this year when the litter comes in, if the right dog is available. And I was like, I won't be able to raise my puppy, Madly. I've already named her. Her name's Madly, because I'm madly in love with her without her even knowing. She's not even conceived at this moment. I was like, I won't get to do that. So it was not any of the big things. It was just, I won't get to go to work, and I love to go to work. I won't get to see where our podcast goes. I won't get to hang. I won't get to travel. I won't get to see the ocean anymore. So it was really good for me to kind of have that. We don't want to say we think about this, but like, it was so, in my vulnerability of thinking about my death, I found all my strengths, right? And you and I talked about this a little earlier today in our quad call with everyone about, it is only in our vulnerability that we really find our greatest strengths. And we as a world are in our greatest vulnerability. And I think that's where we're going to find our greatest strengths. And will people go back to sleep? Yes, because that is their soul's journey. We don't all wake up at the same time, even when there is a major virus barreling down looking at us and we don't even know we're looking at it. Not everybody is going to wake up at the same time. There will be a lot of people through this conflict that wake up. And there will be the right time for everyone to wake up, perhaps not this lifetime. So people aren't going to go back to sleep. People are going to go back to their old ways. There are people in their old ways right now. I know healthcare providers that are in the midst of this that have taken their children on spring break. Right? I mean, people are not going to wake up. People are not waking up right now, and that's okay. Everything is perfect, right? We know that there's not a blade of grass out of order in this universe. I have to keep saying that. I had a surgeon tell me that one time 8-9 years ago, and I have said that line time and time again. There is not one blade of grass out of order on this planet, and it really does provide me hope. And so I love how you talked about what brings us to life, because we really, and I think through our fears is the only way to figure out what brings us to life. I think the only way through the other side is through the emotion of what we're experiencing. And perhaps most of us are feeling fear or terror or hopelessness or helplessness. And only when we open and can give what we're feeling a title. And then once it's okay to talk about that, like it's not every day we talk about our death, but we need to, talk about what it is. Would we regret dying if we died during this pandemic? All of history, there's millions of people that have died in pandemics. We may be one of them. But I love how you said, and you switched that over to, how will we live in this time? That's the best and biggest question and challenge to us in this day. Not even as a healthcare worker, how to combat the virus, but how will I live in this moment? What will bring me to life in this moment if I get another 20 years or 20 minutes? And I love that aspect of it. And I love where you're going. I think I know where you're going with that. And it's probably what we talked about, you and I both talk about two things. We talk about conflict and we talk about waking up, right? That's our platforms. You could go and talk about conflict all day long, along with waking up. And I'm getting better to talk about conflict, and I can talk about waking up all day long. Mm-hmm. And we are in the midst of waking up through this conflict of what's invading the intruder in our life. And the bigger intruder here is the fear. And the bigger intruder is the fear that if we're on the brink of just waking up in the smallest potential, or that we're awake up to figuring out, hey, what's this thing here to teach me? You can just ask that one question. You don't have to be, a Buddhist to ask that question, or the most enlightened soul, or even enlightened at all. But if you could just say, what am I supposed to learn through this? What's this here to teach me? It is here to teach us all something for our soul's journey. Mm. And through that question, it's always about the question, right? Not the external question about how will we combat this. There's nothing external here that is going to be for our highest good. There's nothing external. It's no mask that I will always protect myself with the best equipment we have, because I know our hospital will provide the best we have for protection. It's about the question we come within, because everything that is of anything is really questioned from within. But what is this here to teach me, and what do I need to wake up to? And then what brings me to life in this moment, whether or not I live 20 minutes from now or 20 years from now. Mm-hmm. And I think I just spent 20 minutes just saying the same thing you said in a different way.
Yeah, well, I think we can't say it enough, what brings us to life. I mean, I think we've prided ourselves on all of the podcasts up until now, speaking to our experience, right? Our learned experience, our lived experience, our mastery of certain concepts or ideas or practices. And just like everyone else on the planet right now, we're in the great unknown. Everything that we've done up until now, we can say has prepared us to live for this period, but none of us can say, I mean, again, like, I don't think anybody on the planet living today has been through a pandemic, right? Like
Right.
a month, 2 months, 6 months from now, we don't know what the world is going to look like. We don't know what systems are going to topple. We don't
Right.
know if all the steps we've taken to create security, whether it's financial, emotional, physical, etc., in our own lives, will have been enough to have us come out the other end in a way that we anticipated, right? So we're just in it just like everyone else. And I think what's so valuable about this conversation that we're having is, if it's only just for the two of us, nobody else
Right. Right.
hears it. If it's only just for the two of us, as a reminder to focus on the things that we say are important for us, um, to refocus on what brings us to life, what those passions are, and how do we bring those into our lives in really just in discreet ways, right? I mean, when I listen to you speak often, there is a kind of passion just in the way you speak. Certainly, it's certain topics will make you feel really passionate about that, but you're just a pretty passionate speaker. And so in subtle ways, it's almost like, it's oftentimes I think we can focus on, so what should I do differently? What should we do differently to like express this? And as I'm thinking about this, what brings us to life, it's more like focusing on our beingness,
Mm.
sort of these natural ways that we find ourselves, that we tend to be when we're really living our greatest selves. So maybe it's not so much doing things differently, but simply reconnecting to that, so that the experience that we're having as we're making breakfast for the kids, or sitting down and having conversation at the table, or driving on the way to work and thinking about what the hospital is going to be like, or how you reorganize yourself when you're speaking to the housekeeper that you can't hug. Maybe it's just really subtle. Maybe it's not like, go find your great passion, and all of us out there are still trying to figure out what's our purpose on the planet, because that's where my mind goes also, right? When I think about passion, it's like, what's my purpose on the planet? No, what brings me joy? What raises my vibration? um I don't know.
Well, we've talked about this before, where the real point is freedom, right? The real point, that's what's the point on this planet, where I started how many years ago during your USM, asking people on planes, what's your point on this planet? What's your point on this planet? What's your point on this planet? Working with clients, what's your point on this planet? Like, the real point is freedom. And freedom from what? Freedom from our own minds, freedom from what we let invade us with fear or unworthiness or unhappiness in the midst of the beauty. Like today, there was a baby bobcat sitting on my patio. And then I looked at, okay, well, not that I'm going to go out, but he was beautiful. And they're here in the city of Plano. That's on my back. I live in the city of Plano, right outside of Dallas. And just gorgeous bobcats on my porch, and I was just struck by how beautiful he was. And not that I'm going out, and he probably was sitting there looking at my kitty going, that looks pretty good too. And then I walk out my front door, and there's two mallards swimming in the pool that's next door to me, the community pool's next door. And there's two mallards that landed and thought this was great. It's pool season. It's almost 80 degrees here today. So there's so much just beauty in this being. And
Mm-hmm.
and I wrote, before you even started talking, I wrote do versus be. When you started, it's exactly what it triggered. And what did we say before another podcast? We're not human doings, we're human beings. And right now, I think the beingness is all the being still, because not many people are good with that. And God knows even the people that are good with it aren't going to be good with it a week from now in the house with all their kids. And there was something on Facebook that said, in the light of no sports, there was a lady that was sitting on the other end of my couch. It happens to be my wife, and she's a really nice person. And there's a lot of humor in that, but there's a lot of truth in that. And where we're having to reorganize, reorient ourselves to not doing, we're reorienting ourselves to just being. The canals in Italy right now are just being, and look how they are clearing. Look how they are inviting the dolphins to swim in them. The air in China is not doing anything. It's just being air. And it's so clear now, you can see for miles. Right? Like, it's just a matter of exactly what you said, of being. And I think that I love how we do that. I think we could do a whole podcast on doing versus being, because we are doers. We are human doers. That's exactly what we are, that we think we're supposed to be. But we are really human beings in the sense of we're just here to be the best that we can be. And I think this is a time that we're really, the people that are going to wake up or waking up, or the wokes, they're already doing it now, because they're really struggling to find the context for this within their lives and what it's here to teach us. And I'm telling you, you and I both know there are people in caves around this planet that are holding space for this thing called humanity. And I think now we are being those same people holding space for humanity, either in our thoughts or our prayers to some degree. And we are sending up this same prayer after the thoughts of death for life. Right? So we're firing off rockets, go back to, and I'll go to Abraham, because I was telling Caroline, we need to see what Abraham's saying about this, in the sense of the rocket of desire is life. We are shooting off rockets of desire to live. And nowhere on this planet has the whole human race in my lifetime shot off that same rocket of the request to live. Even if it's launched in fear. I mean, sometimes, and I think it's through the fear that we're going to figure out how we're going to live, even if we only live for 20 more minutes or 20 more years.
It's the ultimate reset button.
Ultimate, yeah, the reorganization, the reorientation of being. And I think that's where we'll end this today, because we got 1,000 more podcasts behind that one, don't we?
We sure do.
And I think what would be important too is to, for us to record a podcast on how we're being in the midst of non-doing, right? Like, because you and I've talked about things we're implementing in our home life, with ourselves and with our family, mine with no children, yours with children, and how we're navigating those waters as the hours tick by, right? So I think maybe the next podcast that we talk about doing versus being, and how we're navigating that in this social isolation but emotional stimulating time.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, girl.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
All right, my friends, I think that's it today. And if you want to find more about us, we're at www.takeashiftnow.com. We're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And then you can touch base with us or contact us on our website. So love and blessings to each one of you out there as we fire off more rockets for life and living. And here's the deal. We're all taking a shift right now.
Love you.
Love you. Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Take a Shift, a part of Mental Health News Radio Network. We are so grateful for your time and presence. Always remember, you're just one shift away from a better feeling day in your life. Until next time, remember to listen, ignite, and transform. Much love from us to you.